So this whole session is primarily a question and answer. Questions that I've been gathering over the years. You guys that don't know me, I've been with Royal LePage as a manager now for over 10 years. I have been working, so I worked at downtown office at 905 King. I worked at, or I managed, I should say, at 905 King. I managed over at 154 Bathurst, which we opened that office back in the day. Then I moved to the Mississauga office, worked in Mississauga for 3 years. Then 3 years after I left to go to Johnson and Daniel. And then I decided to come back to Mississauga just about a year ago now. So I've been here back in Mississauga for a year. And as Steve knows, I'm going to probably die here. So they're going to take me out on a stretcher out of this place one of these days. Not for long, because I don't plan on leaving anytime soon, but I'm going to be here for a while. So that's my background. I've been selling real estate in all kinds of different commercial, residential, investment, pre-construction, you could, whatever, you name it. I've been doing real estate for just about 20 years now. So it's, I may not have the experience of the 50-year veteran, but I certainly have the knowledge of the 50-year veteran, because I've been working with offices anywhere from, I think we started off with about 28 people at one place, and I managed an office of over 200 people. So the experience of all these folks combined definitely gives me an incredible background in terms of being able to answer your questions. So with that, I hope I'll be able to answer all your questions today. We've got 27 participants so far. Probably I'm one of them and Sandra's the other. So we've only got about 25, but I'm not going to hold you back. It is now 3 minutes after 1, and we'll go through the package. Does everyone have have access to the information? They have access to the package that was sent with the, I guess, when you signed up. Is there anybody that does not? And if you don't, you can put up your hand. Oh, Heidi doesn't have it. Anybody else?
I didn't receive anything.
Okay.
I just dropped the link in the chat, so anybody that doesn't have access to it can click that link and they should be able to open that drive folder.
You are freaking awesome. Thank you.
I know.
Nice to have that. You're on top of it. I love that. Thank you. I appreciate it. So with that, let's get started looking at the information that we're going to look through. So you've got the condominium assignment FAQ, which is your frequently asked questions. Really, this whole assignment thing is about frequently asked questions. So we're going to go through that. We'll go through the agreement of purchase and sale, which is really the assignment of the agreement of purchase and sale. Okay, it's the Form 145. We'll also look at the assignment of a condominium agreement of purchase and sale. We will look at what home buyers and sellers need to know, which is a handout that RICO decided that home sellers need to know when they saw that there were a lot of, let's call them ghost buyers and sellers out there in terms of assignments, people buying something, assigning it to somebody else and that sort of stuff. So they wanted to make sure that people were aware what assignments were all about from RICO's point of view. And you know that their point of view is always about making sure control and protecting the consumer, right? So condominium assignments basic guidelines, this is something that was put together by the Toronto Real Estate Board some time ago, and I put that together as part of my presentation so that you have also some information there. There are some information about the basics of the condominium sales. There are information about condominium assignments, and then there's the other issue with co-ownership and stuff like that. And we'll talk a little bit about pre-construction. I know that I attended the last pre-construction session that Jonathan was presenting, and he did speak quite a bit about assignments as well, but he didn't go into too much detail. So I'll definitely be going a little bit more into detail, especially when it comes to calculation of what you have to pay, what the assignee will have to pay, and all that sort of stuff. We are dumbing it down quite a bit so that this covers for everybody. Anybody who's ever not even heard about what is an assignment. So we're going all the way down to what does assignee mean, what does assignor mean, all the different terms and that sort of thing. So I hope I'm not going to lose anybody. Nobody's going to fall asleep. And I know you can't throw tomatoes at me through the screen, thank God. So that'll be a good thing, especially when I'm sitting here in the office looking at all this snow. So any questions so far? If you have a question, unmute yourself and you can speak up, or put up your hand, and I'm happy to say go ahead and tell me what you've got. I don't think I've said anything to offend anybody so far, I hope. There's a lot of serious looking people here. So terms, let's go into terms. What are the terms? An assignor. An assignor is the original buyer of the unit who is now selling the unit. So we don't use buyers and sellers when we're talking about assignments. We use assignor and we use assignee. So the assignee is the new purchaser. That is the new buyer who is buying or signing as the assigner. I've got somebody who's saying hello here. People drive by, bring their dogs, and they say hello because our office is closed. All right, so we've got assignor and assignee. Assignor is the original buyer who is now selling. Assignee is the now buyer, the new buyer who's buying the assignment. Okay, those are the terms that we're going to be using on a regular basis. So just so that everybody understand the terms, and that's what you should use. You shouldn't use buyer and seller because it could be confusing for somebody who has not used those terms before. So when does an assignment happen? Assignment happens in different situations. Somebody purchases a unit and they decide somewhere down the road before closing that they are going to sell it to make profits. That's typically the most common reason why somebody would use an assignment. Sometimes people are, their circumstances change. So you may have something like, I bought a unit with my fiance, and then my fiance kicked my butt to the curb and she decided she's not moving in with me. So now I'm not moving into it anymore. Now I got to sell it. I got a new job in Dubai and I'm moving to Dubai. So now I got to sell it. So sometimes, or one of the things that happened back in 2017, I purchased the property from Plans and now I don't qualify for a mortgage. And now I have to sell it. I bought it. It was way too expensive at the time. And I thought it was okay because prices were going up. The government decided to change the rules, and now it's not worth the money that I had originally paid for it. I just want out. So there are a lot of different reasons why people are assigning. The other thing, a situation that happened to me while I was at Johnson & Daniel, one of our salespeople had her own listing, and that listing was listed, I think it was at 2.8 or something like that, 2,800,000. She had 6 buyers. One of the buyers was actually her own buyer. That buyer missed out. They did not put in a high enough offer for the seller to accept. Sotheby's brought in the winning offer, and then her buyer decided to call the Sotheby's agent and say, hey, would your buyer sell it to me? And thus, he says, yeah. What are you going to pay us? He says, I'll pay you $250,000 more. 2 days later, he's willing to pay $250,000 more. So the Sotheby's agent said, yeah, my buyer's willing to sell it to you, no problem. So my agent then called me and said, what is this assignment thing? Apparently, my buyer called Sotheby's and now they want to do this assignment thing. So I showed her what she needed to do, and that was it. The seller was not so happy that they missed out on making an extra $250,000, but it happened. So those are a lot of different circumstances. So it's not always just about buying a property from the builder and then assigning it. So there's a lot of different reasons. So a signer can't wait for the house or condo to finish. A signer circumstances have changed. A signer wants to avoid paying the land transfer tax and interim occupancy costs. Does everybody know the amazing amount of money you have to pay when you're buying pre-construction upon closing? Because there are a lot of costs that are involved. And some of the just basic things is land transfer tax, occupancy costs, and of course, at the end of it all, there are a lot of levies that you have to pay on top of what you owe for the property. So sometimes you just want to get rid of that, take your profit and walk away. So those are just some of the reasons, as we said. So what is an assignment? What is an assignment really? Is it a purchase of the property that other person was going to buy? What do you think? Anybody put up your hand, say something, speak up. I can't be talking the whole time, guys. Somebody's got to say something. Come on. Okay.
You've already explained several scenarios. So essentially,
Right.
it boils
So what
down
is
to
an assignment, Saeed?
it's allowing somebody to purchase a property which somebody's already bought it from the listed builder or whoever the seller is, creating this kind of opportunity to sort of pass it on to somebody else.
An assignment is buying an APS that already exists.
Ooh, I like that. Who said that?
I did, Andrina.
Andrina. Sorry, Andrina, I can't actually see you.
I know you don't look so great, but I'm here.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. So thanks for putting up your hand. You can put your hand back down now. So she is absolutely right. So assignment in its simplest term, assigning something is a purchase of a contract. You're actually buying a contract. That's it. You're not buying a property. You're buying a contract that allows you to buy that property. But really what you're doing is buying a contract. So that is what an assignment is in the simplest terms. So you're now looking at the actual written official description of what an assignment is, and this is what it is. It's simply to purchase a property, but really most commonly looking at, I'm buying a contract from you. That's what I have a contract in my hand, I'm going to sell it to somebody. So I'm just assigning it. Okay. You can actually do this in a lot of different cases, and we're going to talk about some other scenarios of how you can actually do it in different reasons. So questions come up. This question is, can an assignment, an agreement for purchase and sale involving any type of real estate be assigned? So I'm selling a piece of land. I'm selling a commercial property. I'm selling I have a contract to purchase a piece of land. I have a contract to purchase a condo. I have a contract for pre-construction that has not been built yet. I have a contract for a resale home. Are any of those okay to assign? Can you buy any of these contracts? Is it open, or is there any sort of a restriction to what can be assigned and what cannot be assigned? So the answer to that is yes. Under normal circumstances, any agreement of purchase and sale, can be assigned, providing that the agreement does not prohibit assignments. And you'll notice that when you're looking at a contract from a builder, that contract typically says 99.99% of the time, it says you are not allowed to assign. And then when you bring up assignment to the builder will say, oh yeah, here's an amendment. We'll allow you to assign, but you have to pay us so much money. And here's all the terms for what it is that you can do when you assign. So agreements typically from a builder will say you are not allowed to assign when we're talking about pre-construction. What about other agreements? Because there are a lot of other different kinds of agreements. We talked about, the different types and whether you can actually assign any type of an agreement. Well, so we can talk to that in a bit when I go into details about the different type of contracts. In an agreement, is an assignment agreement legal? Yeah, it is. Again, as we said, as long as the assignment is allowed. There are typically costs, and you have to pay if you're buying from a pre-construction and there's developer involved, then you're paying money to that developer in order to get this done. There are a whole bunch of different costs to that, and we'll look at the costs as well. So an assignment is legal as long as it's allowed. Is it necessary to get permission from the seller or the developer to assign the agreement of purchase and sale? What do you guys think? Oops, I gave the answer. Is it necessary to get the permission? No, it's not necessary to get the permission always, unless it says so in the agreement. So in the case where my seller, my agent in my office had somebody request to be assigning this agreement, they actually went to the purchaser of the agreement and say, hey, can you sell me this contract that you just bought? Did we need to go back to the seller and say, hey, Mr. Seller, are you okay with us doing this? You losing $250,000 and I'm making $250,000 deposit, profit? What do you think? Anybody?
If it is not expressly prohibited through the agreement of purchase and sale, property is open to further, assignment. This is what it seems.
Yeah, exactly. So if I don't prohibit, and you'll notice a regular agreement of purchase and sale, a resale agreement of purchase and sale, there are no standard terms in there that say you are not allowed to assign it. So anybody can assign an agreement of purchase and sale on a standard RIA form, as long as there is no actual clause that says you're not allowed to assign it. So when you see those offers, and I'm sure many of you guys have seen it, when you get an offer and it says seller agrees to allow the buyer to assign this agreement to anybody and so on, and future whatever, and this will be done through an amendment and all this kind of stuff. Do you really need to put that in there? No, you don't. It already says you're allowed to assign. You can assign it without you having to say anything at all to any seller. Now, if the seller puts in there that you're not allowed to assign it unless you get permission, that's when you need to get the permission, and you need to ask the seller to remove that clause, or to understand why the seller put that clause in there. So it's really important to understand that when you put that clause in there in your agreement of purchase and sale for a resale property, that you're actually raising flags. Now I've raised a flag to say, I may have to, or I may be selling this. I'm buying this property so I can resell it to somebody else. I'm going to reassign it to somebody else. And now the seller says, well, hold on a second. Why are you doing that? So by doing that, you're actually raising a flag. If you have to if you have to assign the agreement of purchase and sale, but are doing it without the permission of the seller, there's nothing wrong with that. You can absolutely do it. As long as you're not raising flags. If the seller already puts that clause, and for you guys, we're going to give you, for everybody that's on the call, we will give you a couple of clauses that you can put in the agreement of purchase and sale in the future if you do decide you want to limit anyone from reassigning the agreement of purchase and sale that you have. Okay, so that'll be available to you. And that's one of the boilerplate clauses that we'll give you. So is there a special form for assignments? Yes, there are two special forms for assignments, Form 145 and Form 150. So 150 is for assigning the freehold, and Form 145 for assigning the condo. So, and again, whether it's a resale or it is a pre-construction, those are the two forms that you're primarily using. And please do use those forms. It's kind of like trying to sell a freehold townhouse, but it has an association fee. You're not going to use a freehold form, and you're not going to use the condominium form. What form do you guys use?
Auto.
You got it. HODL form, right? Parcel of tied land. It's a freehold, but it also has a section that you have to pay money for, which may be a common driveway, maybe, whatever it is. It's freehold and it's a condominium at the same time. So you can't use either the freehold or the condominium, but you have to use the HODL form. This is the same type of situation where you're using Form 145 or Form 150, but please never use the agreement of purchase and sale. So, will the assigners or assignees lawyers service be adequate? You'll find that a lot of lawyers will say, sure, yeah, we can do this for you. Please be careful, because there are a lot of lawyers out there that don't really know what is really involved with an assignment. Lawyer that does a lot of assignments will know how to deal with certain forms. We'll be asking for things like all the disclosure documents that the builder has given. They'll be able to understand Schedule B better than some others, because there are a lot of people that can't figure out the numbers, and we'll talk about the numbers in a bit. But I have seen people who have really messed up some of these, and some are amazing. So please retain a lawyer, or make sure that your client retains a lawyer that knows something about assignments, because there are a lot of different elements to this that may actually cause your client extra money. One of those elements obviously is talking about taxes. HST, is HST applicable, not applicable? Is it payable? Who's going to pay it? All that kind of stuff. And in this situation, we will be taking an example of what is HST, when is HST applicable, when it's not applicable. And you guys will see why it's a tricky area. And a lot of times the lawyers, if they don't know what they're doing, they can mess it up for either the assignee or the assignor, and then somebody will have to pay an extra $25,000, $30,000 that they probably would not want to pay otherwise. Any questions so far? Good. We'll go through more questions. So, can the assigners realtor market on EMLS? Not typically. You will see that, yes, even if we give you permission to assign, you will not be allowed to assign it on EMLS. You will not be allowed to promote it on EMLS. You will not be allowed to market it on any electronic platform. So nothing web-based that you're allowed to put it on. There are many or several, I guess, assignment pages on Facebook, on different type of platforms out there. People put on Kijiji, that sort of thing. It's actually prohibited. Was that Melissa?
Yeah, Ahmed, right now I am showing a number of properties with the ADI group out in Waterdown, Hamilton area, and almost all of them are assignments that I'm showing. It's actually listed as an MLS listing, and it's saying assignments. These are Toronto agents who have it on our board and have it on the Toronto board. So is there a chance that they're doing it without permission or?
Look, so there's definitely a lot of chances. Let me tell you about a scenario. So while I was at Johnson and Daniel, I had a realtor who had 2 listings or 2, I guess, assignments that she had at One Bloor. And this was is it One Bloor West or One Bloor East? That's not. Anyways, the one that's already built. She had 2 listings in there. She came to me and she said, I've got this assignment. It says that I'm not allowed to market on any platform, any MLS, but there are a lot of realtors already marketing this on the MLS, and it seems to be a standard thing that they're doing. So I said, would you go back and talk to the people at the sales center or the developer and see if you can get their permission? And she called, went and spoke to somebody at the sales center, and they said, sure, go ahead, no problem, go ahead. And even though it said in the agreement that she's not allowed, or that the assignor is not allowed to market it in that manner, they said, no problem, go ahead. So she came to me and she said, yep, they said, no problem, go ahead. And I said, well, can you ask them to give it to you in writing? Maybe send you an email, send you something that says that they'll let you do it. She went back to them and she said, well, can you just send me an email, send me something, text message, something that says that I'm allowed? They said, nope, we're not sending you that, but you can go ahead and do it. So at that point now, it's up to you, it's up to your client to say, listen, we're not allowed to do this. If I do it, I'm putting you in jeopardy because you are now going against the term of that contract, and there's a potential that you could lose your deposit and the unit. The builder at that point can actually pull the unit back, and they will keep the deposit because you have now broken the terms of your agreement. So it's serious, and I can tell you that when Max Cohen comes in to do a presentation for us at J&D, he would tell everybody it's happened several times where the builder has actually pulled the unit and kept the deposit and found the person yeah, sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
No, so I was going to say, so in the case, I understand that. So I understand that there are potential serious implications of loss for the seller. Would the realtor also be at any, knowing that what these rules are, would we be at all liable for anything? That's one question. The other question is where they have paragraphs that say you are allowed to assign for a fee of $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever, then that would also mean, I'm assuming, that we could then list on MLS. Is that correct? Is that or not?
Well, I'll tell you. So the answer to the first one, yes, you could be liable if you do not get some sort of direction in writing. Okay. So I always say, get direction in writing from your assignor, because the assignor says, here's the written word from the builder. It says not allowed, period, right? That's what it says in the contract. However, when we spoke to the people at the sales office, when we spoke to the developer says, go ahead and do it, no problem, everybody else is doing it, we're not worried about it, right? So there's that. So absolutely, in order to ensure that you are not liable and you're not gonna, anybody's gonna come back and say the realtor should have known better because they are the professional, you must get something in writing from your seller / assignor. Okay, that's number one. Number two, just because the builder says you're allowed to assign, there are also terms for that assignment. So you need to read the terms, and you will see in almost everything that the builder puts together, and we're talking pre-construction, right? So with pre-construction, the developer always says, yes, we'll allow you to assign under these terms. You have to pay us $8,000. You have to pay for our lawyer fees. You have to pay this. You have to pay that. You are not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. And those are some of the terms. And you'll see in those terms that one of the things that you're not allowed to do is to market on MLS or on any electronic platform. So Kijiji, Facebook, that kind of stuff. Now, one of the things that we do have available to us is things, within our brokerage is the Broker Bay platform for things like assignments that, again, it's supposed to be a closed type of platform where only participants within the Broker Bay family are able to see these listings. So if you put it in there, you might be able to get away with it. But if the builder finds out, they will send you a cease and desist letter, and you will have no choice but to take it off. How do you say your name? Andrina?
Yeah, you can call me Andy. It's easier.
All right, Andy, sounds good.
So
Go ahead.
I have two questions quickly. Why are these builders or developers so against assignments? And secondly, you mentioned that even in a regular residential sale, there can be assignments and there could be a clause which will not allow the buyer to do that. Would that be like extra protecting your client? Those are my two questions.
Yeah, so again, the reason typically a builder is against the assignments is, number one, they don't want you competing with their sales if they haven't sold everything. So one of the terms that they would normally put in there, again, talking about, you have to pay $1,000 for an assignment or 5,000 or whatever. Some will actually say you're not allowed to assign it unless you assign the builder has already
Sold everything?
sold everything.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Or sometimes they'll say of that particular unit style, right? So they might be a little easier on that, saying, but most of the time it'll be no way if we haven't sold anything. If we haven't completely sold out, then you're not allowed to assign. Some will put a restriction and say you're allowed to assign it, but you have to assign it through our agent.
Oh, okay.
For example, I had an agent at Johnson and Daniel. His name is Kevin Krieger, who had all the sales for Camrost. Camrost also did a deal with Kevin to say that no one is allowed to assign any properties within any sales within those buildings except through Kevin.
Okay.
So if your client wanted to assign it, they can't go through you. They have to assign it through this other agent who's working with the builder. So there's that. Your other question was?
Well, if I'm just selling a residential, a house, and I want to kind of protect my seller from incurring in who knows who's going to buy or who's going to assign, et cetera. Is that smart to put that kind of a clause where assignments are not allowed, or is it a really big impediment for a buyer?
So in a seller's market, where there's a frenzy of sales. So for example, I'm doing I am holding back offers, and I'm doing an offer presentation tonight. I expect to have a lot of buyers interested, and I'm expecting to get tons of offers tonight. Now, if I don't restrict the resale of that particular contract, somebody comes in today and offers me, let's say, the property is listed at 800. Somebody offers me 950. Okay. And I accept that offer. Tomorrow, somebody finds out it sold for 950 and they were willing to pay $1,050,000.
Yeah, I get it.
My seller now feels, oh my God, why didn't you get me that 100,000?
Yeah.
You should have restricted it from being reassigned without my permission. So if somebody wants to reassign it, no problem, but I want some of that profit. So we give you that option to say to your seller, listen, if you want, we can put this in the offer. If anybody decides to resell this without our permission, then they can.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And it's the same thing for the builder. The builder also wants profit. So sometimes they're saying, well, hold on a second, I sell it to you for this much, and then you're turning around and everybody in the building is that purchased is now making tons of profit where we could have made that profit. So yeah, I'm not letting you sell it until its occupancy period. When it's in the occupancy period, then I'll allow you to assign it. but otherwise no. So again, those are all restrictions that the pre-construction industry, the developers put into your agreement of purchase and sale when you're buying pre-construction. So so that just gives you some ideas why people would do that. So let's go more. What if the construction, occupancy, closing, or unit transfer date is delayed? Well, assignee is the responsible party once the assignment has happened. So once you buy a contract, that contract is yours. If everything is pushed back or there are extras that you have to deal with, there's any kind of a transfer date delay or any of that stuff, it's the responsibility of the assignee. So the new buyer, the assignee, is now dealing with it, not the assignor.
Ahmed, I have a question here.
Sure.
Yeah, in the previous scenario that you mentioned, that in a seller's market, yes, you can put a clause in there, but as I think Melissa or Andrea mentioned, that if it's a buyer's market, then that would potentially be a big impediment on the potential for sale.
Absolutely. And this is when it depending on which side of the table you're sitting on. I mean, if you are in a buyer's market, you start doing things, you'll start seeing things like, well, the buyer is not going to buy this, the purchase of this property is actually conditional on the buyer selling their own property. How many of those do you see today? None, right? The purchase of this property is conditional on the seller giving the buyer a vendor take back. Well, how many of those do we see today? Absolutely none. You know, those are the kind of things that, depending on the market, the type of market that you're in, if it's a seller's market, everything's obviously on the seller's side and you're giving them everything that they want in the kitchen sink. But when it's a buyer's market, then you start seeing different kinds of conditions. You know, all of a sudden you start seeing more and more of this offer is conditional on the sale of the buyer's property, and you'll see more of those. As it gets, you know, worse and worse, and it becomes more and more of a buyer's market, and the seller just can't get rid of it, you'll see things like rent to own start to come back again. And that's where somebody is willing to allow somebody to move into the property, live in it for 2-3 years before they can actually close, and it becomes a rent to own situation. So depending on the market, absolutely. So when it's a seller's market, you're going to see the restrictions on assignments. When it's a buyer's market, you're going to see a lot of, you know, I can assign this if I can't close for whatever reason, right? So you'll see that. So what if the assignee actually cannot close? You know, I buy a contract from you and then my situation changes and I am not able to fulfill my obligation to close this agreement. What happens? Well, what happens is the assignor is always on the nut. The assignor is always responsible. Assignor never walks away from the deal completely. And this is something that you have to be really careful if you represent the seller, that somebody doesn't put in a clause in your agreement of purchase and sale when you are reselling a home for resale, whether it's freehold or a condominium, and they put in there that this agreement can be assigned to any person or individual or entity, and that the original purchaser will not be responsible any longer. All responsibility will be taken off that original person. Never ever allow that. Always make sure that the original purchaser, even if you're going to allow the agreement of purchase and sale to be sold, make sure that you restrict it enough that the original seller, the original buyer who is now selling the agreement, is always going to be responsible for it. And you'll see that with pre-construction, always. The assignor is always still held responsible right up until closing to ensure that they are there to pay it. So I sell my pre-construction agreement to you. You are unable to close. Guess what? You're going to probably lose your deposit. all the money that you put in, typically about 20% or so. And then on top of that, the assignor has to close that deal. So, and they may actually come after you for any losses or damages as an assignee. But the assignor is still responsible.
What happens to the, when the assignee purchases the contract, there is some exchange of funds, I suppose, at that time. What happens to those funds if the assignee sort of is not able to honor?
So typically, we're looking at so absolutely the assignor so to close the deal, the assignor has to pay it. Has to pay whatever balance to the developer to ensure that they close the deal. Now, the money that has exchanged hands, typically the builder is holding on to 20% or whatever the deposit was, and they never ever let go of that. Now, if there were some, let's call it profit, then that profit has to be worked out between the assignee and assignor. So depending on, whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market, then the seller, which is the assignor, may ask for favorable conditions for them. Or if it's a buyer's market, then the assignee is going to ask for favorable conditions for them. So they may ask to pay the money up front, pay the money later, depending on which side of the table you're sitting on, and whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. So let's say, for example, I'm paying you $100,000 more than what you paid for the property or what you paid for that contract. So you might say, well, you know what, I can wait for the 100,000 and I'll take that on closing because you're giving me 100,000 more than what somebody else was willing to give me. Let's say if it's a buyer's market. But if it's a seller's market, you say, I want it all up front. I want my profit now. I don't want my profit later when you close. So it really depends on which side you're looking at and whether it's a buyer's or seller's market. In today's market, it's definitely a seller's market, even with assignments and with condominium, with pre-construction. And a lot of the sellers, the assignors, are looking for their profit, or at least part of their profit, up front. They don't want to wait for it. Melissa?
Wouldn't that also make sense to do that as well in the seller's market? Because what you're saying is the assignor is still responsible right to the very end. So he may as well, in the seller's market, try to at least get something back in his hands before closing.
Yeah.
I would think that would make sense because as I said, to me, knowing that my seller / assignor, or let's call it assignor, is responsible for any failing of the assignee, I'm going to want to make sure I have as much money in my hand as possible up front. And then if anybody wants to take me to court, they can, but I have this money sitting with me.
You got it.
Does that
Absolutely.
make sense?
So absolutely. So that's exactly what typically happens. So however, in terms of the releasing of the funds, so as an assignor, I usually will pay the money, and that money's sitting in trust, and it sits there until somebody says, this is how we're going to release this money. As an assignor, I've put down 20,000 to 20% of whatever the money is. Let's say 200,000 for $1 million. I put 200,000. This property is going to close in 2 years from now. I don't want my 200,000 to be sitting there. I want that money because it's sitting with the builder anyways. So I want that money. So I'm going to at least ask for that money to be released to me upon this deal becoming firm and binding, right? Okay. So that's at least for my deposit. But what about my profit? Well, as an assignee, I don't want to give you the profit and you walk away with it, because if this development, for whatever reason, does not finish, doesn't finalize, things turn and the construction, the development company goes belly up or something happens, well, who's going to give me back that money that I paid for a profit? At least I might be able to get my $200,000 back from the builder because they're holding that. But what about the profit that I paid you? I want that back because the deal never happened. Once I've given it to you, you walk away, I've got no recourse. So it's important to ensure, depending on which side of the deal you're sitting on, of course, if you represent the assignee, you don't really want to release any money until the deal is binding, which is, you know, the deposit. But then any profit, you really don't want to release the profit to the seller, the assignor, until you know for sure that you've taken at least possession of the unit. Okay. And obviously, for different reasons, if you are in a condominium building, well, there is the occupancy period, right? You've taken possession of the unit, you're actually occupying it. You don't own it yet, but you actually occupy the unit. Well, at that point, you may be feeling better about releasing the profit to the assignment, right? That's when the money might exchange hands. So,
Can
yeah,
I ask a question?
sure.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, who's this? Kim?
Mary.
Mary.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Mary.
So I have a client who's doing exactly this. They bought a unit. The unit, including the parking and everything, is 580,000, say, and they put down already 112. So they would probably like to make a profit of 80,000 on that.
Okay.
So what you're saying is they would advertise it for, instead of 581, they're saying that this property is going to be 660. Okay.
Right.
So if I'm representing the assigner, then the buyer or the assignee is going to give them back their deposit right away, which is 112,000. And then the 80,000 on top profit, you're saying they will probably write into the deal, they will release upon occupancy?
Typically, there are different times, 3 different times, different areas when money exchanges hands. One is when the deal becomes firm and binding. Okay, and that's when you remove the last condition, and typically the last condition is the developer's consent. Okay, so releasing once it becomes firm and binding, you now own that agreement of purchase and sale that the assignor purchased from the developer. So you can release some money then. Typically, you don't want to release any more than the deposit that was paid to the builder that is being held by the builder. So now you're releasing, $200,000 of your assignee's deposit to the assignor. Okay, to say, here's your money back that is being held by the builder, and I've basically, that money that's being held by the builder now belongs to the assignee. So that's part of it. Now there's another 80,000 profit, or whatever the profit may be.
Yeah.
When does the assignor get that? Well, it really depends, again, how you negotiate it. If you negotiate it because it's a seller's market and the seller says, I want my money up front, and the buyer is desperately wanting to buy this, and it's a reputable builder that you're dealing with, then it's up to the assignee to say, yeah, you know what, I'll let you have the money. So I'll let you have the 80,000 upon firming of this deal, when the deal becomes firm and binding. Or the assignee can say, no, I'll give you the money, but I want to make sure that I've at least got possession of the unit. I don't own it yet, but at least I got possession. So that's when the occupancy period starts. Or I'll give you the entire money at the end when I close. So here I am. I'm a first-time home buyer. I'm getting most of my money from the bank, because the bank is going to finance this, and they're financing obviously the profit, whatever, except for the down payment, whatever down payment I'm going in with. Well, obviously I don't have the money to pay you, not up front. I will have the money when the bank gives me the money. So I'm willing to pay you an extra $20,000 as long as you wait till later to take that profit. You see, so depending on where you're going to pay that profit, you may want to negotiate a different So if I come to you and say, listen, I'll give you, you bought it for 580, I'll give you $700,000 if you wait to take your profit on closing. But if you don't wait to pay, if you don't want to wait to take your profit on closing, I'm only going to pay you $640.
Okay.
Right? So this is a negotiable thing. You can now negotiate that within, because I'm getting my money later. It's going to cost me money to borrow it now and wait for 2 years.
So would most wise assignees do that?
So it's a negotiable thing, right? So again, if you've got 5 assignees that want to purchase this property and everybody wants it, they're going to try to give favorable terms to the assignor.
And how do you advertise it if unless we can use Broker Bay that this is available?
Yeah, so a lot of times what you're doing is actually putting together a information sheet, and you're sending it to as many realtors as you want directly, but if you're not allowed to market it on the MLS.
Okay. And when you say it takes some, you have to submit all of this assigner paperwork to the builder for their approval. Typically, how long is the turnaround time for that?
It really depends on the builder and how well they like to deal with assignments. So some are dealing with a lot of assignments and they have no problem, and their lawyer does things fairly easily. It can take from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. So a lot of times what happens is the deal falls apart in terms of the timing. So what really happens is you're saying this deal is conditional upon getting the approval of the developer, right? Upon the developer's final approval to assign, and the developer says, yeah, we're working on it. The developer's lawyer is working with the assignee's lawyer, and they're working things out. Just let us work on it. Don't worry, there's good faith and we're all working on it. Don't worry, it's all going to come together. And then they do an amendment saying that, this agreement it will continue to be in force, although the timing has actually changed.
Okay.
So I see my realtors getting really frustrated and worried that, oh my God, I gave 3 weeks for the developer to give me their permission. They haven't, and the agreement is going to be null and void and all that kind of stuff. As long as the lawyers are working on it, you will see that they make things work out. Just make sure that you're communicating with the lawyers so that they're aware of where you're at, so that you're not, your anxiety levels are at a much better place. That's typically what happens. So what about the cost for assigning? You'll find that a lot of times when you ask for the assignment, these days, one of the incentives, because everybody was asking for assignments at one point or another, one of the incentives the builders, developers are saying you have is free assignments. Well, free is never really free. So just be careful because some will say it's $5,000. Some will say you have to pay us a part of the profit if you assign it. Most of the time they're saying there's a certain amount of money that you're going to pay, and then there are other fees, like, for example, legal fees. Well, the legal fees don't just cover the assignees or assignors legal fees for doing it, but it's also the builder's legal fees. So you have to look at the builders. What is the builder's legal fees? They're not just $1,300 or $1,500. No, sometimes they're $3,800 or more. And they're actually written within the agreement, right in the assignment clauses. It'll say that you're paying this fee, a standard fee for legal on behalf of the builder. So you're actually paying the builder's legal fees for doing that as well, on top of the fee that you may be paying for what they call administrative charges and so on. So you are paying those fees, or the assignee or the assignor, depending again on who's going to pick up the fees and who's going to decide to pay for those fees. Again, if it's a buyer's market, the assignor will have to pick up the costs. If it's a seller's market, you're going to be negotiating for the assignee to pick up the costs, right? So again, those are all points where you, as the realtor, can negotiate for your buyer or seller, the assignee or the assignor. So,
like a quick question.
sure.
I'm actually working on an assignment, and right now it's not closed yet. There's a clause in there that I'm not sure what to think of it. It says the sum equal to the real estate fees plus HST from listing brokerage trust account shall be released to the listing brokerage's commission account after consent has been received by the vendor. Yeah,
A lawyer wrote that up, didn't he?
I'm not sure. It's in the Schedule A.
That's a lawyer. That's a one
Okay.
of these. The thingy will come from the thingy. So now you got to take that and just break it down and actually see what it says. So I'm sorry. Say that again, Cam.
Okay, so it says the sum equal to the real estate fees plus
Okay, so
HST
real
from the
estate. Okay, so the real estate fee plus HST,
listing brokerage's trust account.
listing brokerage trust account. So the company that actually represent the assignor, yeah,
Right, shall be released to the listing brokerage's commission account
okay,
after receiving the consent documentations from the vendor.
right. So what that is a smart realtor decided to say, by the way, you're going to pay us our real estate fees when this deal becomes firm. That's when you're going to pay us our real estate fees. We're not waiting until the final closing to get paid our real estate fees.
Okay, got it.
So that is something you will be negotiating again as a, just like you normally would negotiate your commission with a seller.
Okay.
You are negotiating your commission with the assignor, because the assignor is the one that's typically paying your real estate fees. And so you have to negotiate that. When do you get paid your real estate fees? When do you get paid your commission?
Right.
And so what that says, that clause says, is that the real estate fees plus HST will be released to the listing brokerage as soon as this offer becomes firm and binding. That's really what that says.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so that's one of the areas where you have to look at the money. What do you, when do you get paid? Do you just leave it and hope that you're going to get paid upon closing, and that might be 2-3 years later? Or do you get paid when you actually ask for the money? And you need to make sure that it's written within the agreement of when you're going to get paid, right? But that's typically something, again, it's because we're holding money that belongs to these people. And unless you give us direction from both the purchaser and the seller, so the assignee and the assignor, then we are not allowed to touch that money. So the money just sits in trust until we have some direction to say we're releasing this money.
Can I ask, is there a standard form of a phrase or a standard clause to that effect if you're representing the assignor?
So you have to determine that within the listing agreement, Mary. Make sure that it's within the listing agreement that it says, so you basically attach a schedule to the listing agreement that says you will get paid, notwithstanding clause number in the agreement about the real estate commissions, the seller agrees to pay the real estate commissions upon the assignment agreement being firm and binding. And then you put in the clause that Cam was just mentioning about the about releasing the money to the real estate trust so that you can get paid. It's really that simple. Your broker, whoever is your manager, can give you details. If not, you can send me an email, and I'm very happy. Any of you guys, anybody who's on the call, and we've got 42 participants, if you would like, you can send me an email. Anybody who's within our brokerage, I am more than happy to go into details over anything that you need. So whether you need a clause, whether you need me to review an agreement of purchase and sale from a builder and give you my opinion on what you can do and what you can't do with the assignment in terms of whether it's assignable. I've had people come to me and say, you know, I've got a couple of purchasers who bought freehold from a builder and are really not looking at closing these deals, but they would rather assign it. Would you mind looking over the contract? And I'm more than happy to look over the contract and give you guys my my thoughts.
Thank you.
No problem at all. So how does the financing work when you're buying pre-construction? It works the same way. You just have to put in a standard financing clause as a condition for financing. It's always easiest to go to the institution that was originally offering mortgages to whoever buys from that particular builder. As you guys know, typically a builder works with, let's say, RBC or works with TD or whoever when they are actually selling the units, and you can get qualifications straight right from that builder for that project. If you go back to that, whoever it is that was originally looking after that building, that institution, it's a lot easier to get the financing that way. Not every financial institution will do assignments, and definitely in terms of a 3-4 year down the road, the builder will not allow you to assign unless you have secured financing. And so you want to make sure that you get that sorted out and straightened out before you actually take off the rest of the conditions, right? So it's important. And again, it's not everybody that does assignments. So make sure, even though your client may have been pre-qualified, that institution, once you tell them, oh, this is an assignment, they may say, no, we don't do assignments, you have to go somewhere else. So just be careful with that. When does the assignor get their money? So we talked a little bit about that. There are 3 different times or 3 different opportunities when the assignor can get their money. Upon the assignment becoming firm and binding, upon moving into the property or taking possession of the property, and if it's a freehold, then that's also typically the closing date, or on a closing date when we're talking about a condominium, for example. So the actual transfer of the deed or transfer of the title for the property. So those are the 3 times when 3 different opportunities when you can actually save for that. So that's what you're looking at. That's 1, that's 2, and that's 3. Okay. Any questions on that stuff? No? Okay, good. Who gets the interest? A lot of times there's $200,000 sitting, and the builder has to pay interest on the money that's been sitting for a couple of years. So who gets that interest? Anybody? So the assignee normally would take over the contract, but the assignor normally would get that interest. So the assignor would typically, with the help of their realtor, would be putting in the agreement to assign that any interest, rather than going to the assignor, will be going to the assignee. And that would be something that you would need to make sure that you're putting in the agreement. What about closing
that
fees?
would be subject to a negotiation?
Always subject to negotiation, but when you're talking about interest these days, the interest is very small, although the amounts are typically quite sizable. You're looking at $200,000 sitting in the bank for 3 years. How much is that going to make you in terms of interest? You know, you may say, Dad, don't worry about it. It's not something that I'm going to fight over. But again, this is something that you would normally put in a contract. Okay. Closing fees are payable. There are a lot of closing fees that are payable. You're looking at things like, so when you are scrutinizing, or your lawyer is scrutinizing the pre-construction agreement, there are a lot of hidden fees that you have to see. Sometimes they'll say things like levies, building levies or construction levies are, they've been capped at a particular level. Well, is it levies totally, or is it just construction levies or municipal levies, or what is it exactly? So you'll see that there are a lot of different types of levies. Mostly it's a municipal construction levy that, the municipality will assign to a project based on what services they have to bring into the project, and things like restrictions of you have to build so many trees, and you have to put so many parks, and you have to whatever, and that may actually affect the project depending on the municipality. So what we want to make sure as realtors is that we understand what, or at least explain and keep managing the expectations that your assignee knows that he's going to pay or she's going to pay this amount of money or up to that amount of money when they're closing. So some of those are, or a lot of those are in your condominium assignment basic guideline handout that you have in your package. Who pays the interim occupancy cost? Assignee. The assignee pays the interim occupancy cost. What is the interim occupancy cost? Interim occupancy is when the time when the builder has finished your unit, but the rest of the building is not finished yet. So they allow you to occupy that unit for a fee. And what is that fee? The fee is typically their cost for maintaining the building, their cost for the carrying that unit in terms of tax or potentially what they're going to pay in tax, as well as what it costs them for their mortgage and so on. So that is usually negotiated and is already in the agreement when you buy. Melissa?
So specifically to this, supposing you are going to be handling or representing a client who is now in occupancy, they are now paying the occupancy fees. You have to add a clause that says from what date the new assignee will take over the occupancy costs, or how does that work?
So it's in the agreement already that the assignee will take over from the date that this assignment agreement becomes firm and binding. So the day it becomes firm and binding, that's when the assignee will be responsible for the agreement, which calls for them to pay the interim occupancy costs.
So do you have I know it's petty, but let's suppose, because I have had interim occupancy costs that have been honestly $1,200 a month. I have had it. $500 is actually quite low now. Mm-hmm. So let's suppose someone just made the payment, $1,200, but this deal now becomes firm, let's say 2 days later. Are you supposed to put a clause in there to abate that prepayment of that?
Yeah. So you don't have to, no, you don't have to put a clause in there. Remember, there's adjustments, right? And the lawyer for the buyer and the lawyer for the seller in any agreement, they would normally be doing the adjustments, right? Okay. So that would be something that the assignor and the assignee's lawyer would do as an adjustment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the interim occupancy. Does the assignor have to claim capital gains tax? Do we have any accountants in the group? No.
They might have to, right? For any portion that they have gotten over and above their price that they were paying for it, wouldn't they be subject to some kind of capital gains tax for the profit?
So you're making a profit in most cases, right? So you have to be careful not to give advice, please. Again, we're not lawyers, we're not accountants. We never say that we're the experts. So we always send them to their expert. But as you can see here, clause 10 of Form 150 addresses capital gains for non-residents, for example, but it does not always cover all the other areas. So for your client to get a better understanding from the assigner's point of view, what it is they're going to pay, because they may not have to pay capital gains, they may have to pay income tax, depending on how they structure it, for example. There are different ways that you can write off certain things. So again, please send your clients to somebody who can advise them when it comes to taxes, when it comes to dealing with their income, if it's gonna be considered capital gains or if it's gonna be considered income. What about HST? HST is a tough area to give advice on. You will find that your clients, actually some of your lawyers may actually, as you guys know, lawyers are really good at doing what? Right. They screw our deals up sometimes just by their own advice. So in this case, absolutely, it's going to happen. You're going to get a lawyer who says, better be careful because you're going to be paying HST on this. So the assignee's lawyer is going to say, we're not responsible for HST. So where it says HST is included in, they're going to want it to be included in. The assignor's lawyer is going to say, hold on a second. No, HST is going to be extra on this because we don't know if HST is payable or not payable. So this is where they fight back and forth. And then your client says, I don't want to have to worry about this. This is an extra 24,000 or 30,000 or whatever it may be, and I don't want to be responsible for it. So how do we determine whether HST is payable or not? Because remember, that section says if HST is payable, then it's included in or it's in addition to. So is it payable or is it not payable? That's where you have to determine. And if it is payable, who's going to pay it? So if it's included in, the assignee is paying for it. If it's in addition to, the assignee is paying for it. If it's included in, the assignor is paying for it. If it's applicable. Remember, if it's applicable. So if you want more information, you can go onto this website for Revenue Canada, and it actually tells you on these type of assignments how it could be or could not be payable. So let's talk about this consideration. Okay. Again, in some cases, even though they're all assignments, right? These are all assignments. In some cases, HST is payable. In some cases, HST is not payable. It's kind of weird. So why and why not? Let's dig through it a little bit more. In example number 1, you'll see here, Sarah, Francine, and Angela are roommates renting a 3-bedroom house. They entered into a purchase and sale agreement with the builder in January 2010 for a 1-bedroom condo unit in a new condominium complex that was to be built. The purchase price under the agreement was $300,000 and the closing date was July 31st, 2013. 3 friends living together, and they're going to buy a condo unit. In March 2011, the fair market value of the new condo unit had increased by 50%. They entertained several offers for sale of their interest in the condominium unit before assigning it to James. No individual has occupied the condo unit as a place of residence or lodging when they sold their interest in the unit. They split the proceeds, which they each used as a down payment to buy their own homes. HSTs payable or not payable, and why? What do you think? Go ahead, Melissa.
Well, I'm not a lawyer here, but my understanding is, and again, I take all of your advice when I'm talking to clients. I'm not a lawyer. All I know is that there are different rules for purchasing to rent for the purpose of renting out, where you're not living and using it as your principal residence, versus living in your principal residence, at least for time being, until Trudeau decides to change that and tax principal residences. But,
Right.
and I had to throw that in, I'm sorry. So anyways, what I was going to say though, is in this case, all I'm seeing is that you have somebody who, 3 individuals, doesn't matter where they lived, it really doesn't matter. These years actually don't make that much difference. What's really clear to me is they never, not one of them took residence up on this. They were strictly buying it for, either if they were going to hold on to it, they probably would have rented it out. But if they didn't, they assigned it, they sold it to somebody else. The fact that it was assigned prior to closing is where the wrench gets thrown in, because it wasn't established that they were purchasing it to rent it out. It doesn't really matter. So there's this loophole in the middle here where it's like, were they planning on moving in? No, they did sell it, but wouldn't it be James who would be the person who would have to worry about whether or not, after it goes firm, the deal goes firm, whether or not he is living in it or renting it out? Wouldn't that be more applicable rather than whether they were living in it and renting it out because they sold it before it closed?
Okay, so you're asking me a question instead of answering my question. Good one.
Well, yeah,
So let me tell you, here, all assignments by nature are sold before closing, right? I mean, that's what makes them an assignment. You don't want to close, and that's why you assign it, right? Some will have HST payable, and some will not. So in this case, HST is payable. Who pays the HST? Depends on whether you're going to put in your agreement to assign included in or in addition to. And again, this is where you negotiate, right? So it says if HST is applicable. So in this case, is HST applicable? Yes, HST is applicable. Why? We'll tell you in a second. Now, who pays the HST? That depends on whether you're going to say included in or in addition to, okay? And that's where you have to be careful. And that's where the lawyer comes in and says, we want it included in, we want it in addition to, depends on which side of the table you're sitting in. So the answer to that one is that, yes, it is applicable. Why? As it would not be practical for the 3 individuals to live in the condo unit together because it's a 1-bedroom. They're not all going to sleep in 1 bedroom. They considered several offers for their interest in the unit, and there are no indicators to support a contrary intention. Sarah, Francine, and Angela are considered to have acquired their interest in the condo unit for the primary purpose of selling it, okay, to get the money. The sale is considered to be made in the course of a business or adventure or concern in the nature of trade. Accordingly, Sarah, Francine, and Angela are all builders of the condominium unit for the purpose of the HST. As they are builders of the unit and the sale of their interest in the unit is not exempt, because remember, everything is HST payable or unless exempt. And in this case, it is not exempt. So HST applies. Now, who pays the HST? Depending on whether you're going to put in, included in, or in addition to. But we have now determined, based on this scenario, that HST is payable to the government. Who pays it? Included in or in addition to. So example number 2, Cindy enters into a purchase and sale agreement with the builder in November 2010 for a new house that was to be built. She intended to use the house as her primary place of residence. Her new home would be located within walking distance from her workplace and would be closer to her family than the apartment she is currently renting. The closing date for the purchase is September 30th, 2011. In July 2011, 3 months prior to her moving in or closing, Cindy's employer announces that it was relocating to another city located 3 hours away. To keep her current job, Cindy had to move to the city. She sold her interest in the house to John. So she did assign this property, never moved into it, just like the other guys. She is paying HST, or somebody's going to pay HST here, or will they not pay HST? And if that's the case, why not? What do you guys think?
I'm just going to say one thing, Ahmed. I'm trying to understand on that previous example, what I was hearing was we were tracking behavior and we were tracking action. So because they bought this all together, it was 3 of them living, the likelihood of them living in one, and then their behaviors onto how they entertain multiple offers. So if we were only to go by behavior only, she had the intent to purchase it as her principal residence to live in, and her circumstance changed. And as a result, could she argue that HST would not have to be payable because it was originally intended to be her principal residence, and it was only a change of circumstance that had her, or would it still be applicable regardless?
Right.
Again,
So you see, this is where it becomes difficult to determine where you are going to pay HST or not. And this is why we say, please don't make the assumption that HST is not payable, or it is payable. Make sure that you refer them to the lawyer. But let me tell you here, in this particular circumstance, since Cindy had intended to use the house as her primary place of residence, and her only reason for selling her interest in the house was due to work relocation, she did not acquire the interest in the house for primary purpose of selling it. So therefore, she is not a builder in terms of purposes for HST, and the sale of her interest in the house is exempt. So she's exempt from HST. So HST in that particular situation is not payable. So believe it or not, it's based on intent.
Can
So
I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Mary.
If you're an investor and you clearly already have a home and you buy a condo pre-construction and you're going to sell it, you were going to rent it out, say, and things changed and you no longer wish to keep the condo, but you want to assign it. Would that not make you, quote unquote, the builder and be responsible for HST?
Yeah, so the intent, it's all about intent.
Okay, so if the
Revenue Canada
intent,
says, yeah, so Revenue Canada says, what was your intention? Was it for you to move in and have it as your primary residence, or was it not? And if it's not, then somebody's gonna pay HST on this.
so if I'm the investor and I'm now assigning, there is HST applicable, and I'm representing the assigner, would I not want it in the offer that the HST, if applicable, is going to be excluded from the?
Yeah, in addition.
Is it
So
in
you
addition?
represent, yes, absolutely.
In addition, yes.
Yes. So if you represent the assignor, and you know for a fact that likelihood of them having to pay, or whoever, somebody has to pay HST on top of this, then yes, absolutely. If you're representing, you're going to say, you need to pay the HST, Mr. Assignee.
How do you prove that my intent was, like, can't I say, yeah, I intended to move in, but you really didn't, but you just say you did?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about intent. So if you can prove to Revenue Canada, because Revenue Canada will come to you and say, we're not exempting you on this, you got to pay HST, right? Mr. Assignee, right? Because now the assignee is the one that's closing, and on closing, that's when the HST is going to get paid. So they're going to come to the assignee and say, nah, sorry, you're paying HST on this. And the assignee has to say, hold on a second, I bought it from somebody who was planning on moving in. As far as I knew, as far as I understand, as far as everybody understands, there's a declaration that the assignor has to sign, just like you normally would. For example, if you're a first-time home buyer, you have to sign a declaration saying, I swear I have not owned any other property in Canada or outside of Canada, and thus I qualify to be a first-time home buyer. I don't have to pay the first-time home buyer. I'm eligible to collect the first-time home buyer incentive for purpose of land transfer tax and so on. right? So there's a declaration that they have to sign. It's a similar declaration that they have to sign when they're closing this deal.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's again, be careful. I had a gentleman sitting in my in one of my sessions when I was doing this live, and he brought up a situation where he actually purchased a second property. So he lived in Ajax or Pickering or something like that. He was out in the East End, and he had to work 3 days a week in the Burlington area. And so he purchased a property in that side of town, and Revenue Canada said, "Yeah, what are you talking about? What are you trying to get away with here in terms of HST? No, you have to pay it." And then he said, "But hold on a second. I was forced by work to have to buy a second property, and I have to live there because I can't be commuting from Pickering to this place in Oakville or Burlington or outside of Burlington or whatever it was." So they reviewed his case, and apparently they allowed him to write off the HST. So again, it's about intent and what you're going to use it and how you're going to be able to prove to Revenue Canada that your intent was. I mean, it's there because you bought it to move into it, so that you can't have two homes. Yeah, you can. In this case, they allowed him to. So, which is very interesting. So assignment money. Now you're talking about money. This is what an assignment deal would look like. You'll notice that with this, something is missing from your regular agreement of purchase and sale. Anybody notice the difference? What are you missing? You're missing an actual closing date. Remember, a completion date on your agreement of purchase and sale, it has a completion date, right? On this, there is no completion date. So with the assignment agreement, the completion date or the closing date is actually the original closing date that was mentioned or that was set in the original agreement that you're buying. So if you're buying a resale agreement of purchase and sale, and it's a house and it was supposed to close on February 20th, well, that's your closing date because you're buying that contract. This agreement becomes a null and void if the terms are not met. Once all the terms are met, then you've bought that original agreement, and that's what you go by, right? So that's what you're dealing with. You'll notice here, this area here says Schedule A, B, and you'll notice it's already set in here, and there's also a Schedule C. So Schedule B is always your calculation for the money. You know, who gets what money and when do they get it and so on. But mostly calculation of, you know, the money that's being paid, the money that's the deposits, the original price, and so on. The Schedule C, and you'll notice it's part of your agreement. Schedule C is the agreement of purchase and sale that is the subject of this assignment. So the agreement of purchase and sale that's subject to this assignment, a lot of times you ask somebody who's selling an assignment, you say, well, can I see the original agreement? They say, no, not after you give me an offer at least, right? That's kind of like saying, I'm not allowing you to see a property before you give me an offer on that property. Well, but I don't know what condition the property is in. Well, too bad. Give me an offer that's conditional on you viewing the property. Really? I'm giving you an offer and I don't even know what the property is. Like I haven't even seen the property and I'm giving you an offer without even looking at it to see where I'm at, what condition I'm looking at, what's going on, nothing. Okay, fine. So in this case, typically you're asking for a copy of the original agreement, and the seller's agent, the assignor's agent, is going to say, I'm happy to give you that a copy of that when you give me an offer. And then you can attach it as a Schedule C to the agreement at that point, or you can just make it, you know, put in there that this offer is conditional upon the review of, you know, Schedule C by the assignee's lawyer, for example. However, here's the information that you need in order for you to put together Schedule B, which is the numbers. So they need to give you the original price that they paid to the builder. They need to give you the price, the amount of deposit that they paid to the builder. Any checks that are going to be cashed in between the time that this assignment agreement is written and the time it becomes firm, because that has to be added towards the deposit that was paid if it's still ongoing, because sometimes there's still outstanding checks. You have to look at the numbers. So you have to know exactly what they paid as original price. And then if they paid for any upgrades, or if they ordered upgrades and they haven't been paid yet. So in order to make sure that you can calculate the numbers correctly. So if they've paid for upgrades, those upgrades somebody has to pay for. If it's already been paid for on top of the original purchase price, then it becomes part of the original purchase price. And so they're accounted for. If they haven't been paid for, then that's an extra that the assignee has to understand they're going to be paying for down the road. Okay, so this is all stuff that they're going to have to pay down the road. So typically, again, this is Form 145 and this is Form 150. That's what it looks like. You'll see this is Schedule B on Form 145, Schedule B on Form 150. You'll notice one minor change between this form and this form. Can you see the difference? I can't see the difference. Anybody remember those commercials? I'm dating myself here. No? It's right here. This section right here. It says upon occupancy. You'll notice in a condominium, there's an occupancy period. In a freehold, there is no occupancy period, right? So that's the difference between the two forms in terms of Schedule B. So here, Schedule B is where you're going to do your calculation in terms of what money is going to be paid to the assignor. When that money is going to be paid to the assignor, you should put in a Schedule A. And that details when the money is going to be paid out. As we said, you might want to release that money to, some of the money, you might want to release it to pay real estate commissions, for example. You might want to release that money to give to the assignor early, or you might want to release it to give the assignor later. So the detail of when that money is going to be released is going to be based on this, right? Upon acceptance, or upon occupancy, or upon final closing. Those are the 3 times, as we said, 3 opportunities when you can actually release money. So how do we calculate the money? How about we look at what it is that we have here? So here, you've got total purchase price, including the original agreement of purchase and sale, and this assignment agreement. So what money goes here? Let's say, for example, let's talk about, so let's say, for example, we're talking about let's make the numbers simple. Let's say it's $1 million property. I paid $850,000 for, okay? I bought it for $850,000. I'm selling it for $1 million. And I put deposit, let's say $170,000. So my original deposit, write that down, $170,000. My original deposit, I paid $850,000 for it. And I am now asking $1 million. $1 million. All right, who's going to give me an offer? Who wants to give me an offer? Come on, give me an offer, people. Somebody give me an offer. Make me an offer I can't refuse. Seriously, nobody wants to make me an offer?
50. 950. 950.
All right, Mary, so you're giving me 950. Anybody giving me something better? No? Okay, we'll go with Mary's offer, 950. How much deposit will you be putting down, Mary?
20%.
Okay. So 950 times 1 point, oops, not 1.2. 950 times 0.2.
237.50. 227.50. 220.
22,000.
What?
I don't know.
What you talking about, Willis? No, it's 950,000 times 0.2,
So
which
it's
is
20.
190,000.
Oh, yes, 20. I said 25. Okay, 20.
Oh,
Yeah.
did you say 25?
Sorry.
I thought
No,
I
no,
heard you say 20.
20.
So let's go with the 20%, okay?
Okay.
So what numbers go on here now? Let's organize the numbers. Let's say I'm accepting, or I'm looking at this offer, and Mary's putting together this offer for me. So on the first line, it says total purchase price, including the original agreement of purchase and sale and this assignment agreement. So what number would go there on line 1?
950.
950. 950,000, which is basically the price that she's offering me, okay?
Right.
Purchase price of the original agreement of purchase and sale as indicated in Schedule C.
850.
850, which is what I originally paid for it, right? So it goes on the second line. What goes on line 3? Deposits paid by the assignor to the seller under the original agreement of purchase and sale as indicated in Schedule C. What did I say I paid in terms of deposit? 170K, right?
Okay.
20%.
The original, that's the original money that I paid is 170K, right? So that goes on line 3. So far, so good, right? Pretty easy stuff. What goes on line 4? Payment by the assignee to the assignor for this assignment agreement. What goes on line 4?
Wouldn't it be 255,000?
Where did you get 255,000?
It's the amount of extra he wants for, I'm sorry, he wants 100,000, so 270,000. Because he paid 170 down and he wants an extra 100,000.
It's true, he paid 170,000 plus he wants an extra 100,000. What
So
goes on that line, line 4, is only the profit. The difference between line 1 and line 2.
Oh, 100.
You got it. So line 4 is line 1 minus
Oh,
line
I see. Yeah, okay.
because that is the payment that the assignee is paying for to the assignor, which is basically the profit. Or
Okay.
sometimes it could be a loss. So be careful with that. That's why we say it's line 1 minus line 2. Okay, just in case the person is paying less for the property because the person is just, you know, the assignor is trying to get rid of it because he can't get a mortgage. Prices have changed. He's willing to take a small loss just to get rid of the property, right? You know, they bought in Trump Tower and now they're selling it before it closes, that type of thing. So what goes on line 4 is line 1 minus line 2.
Okay.
What about line 5? Deposit paid under this agreement, assignment agreement, in accordance with page 1 of this assignment agreement.
Same, 170.
No, it's 190. It's the deposit that Mary's paying. Mary's client is paying. The deposit on this agreement, not on Schedule C, right? Deposit on the assignment agreement.
Okay.
So 190 would go on line 5, right?
Yep.
So what goes on line 6 then? Balance of the payment for this assignment agreement. Remember, this is the balance of payment for the assignment, not the money that's going to the developer. Because here you're calculating money exchanging hands between the assignee and the assignor. So what goes on line 6?
760,
80,000?
760,000.
Ah, I like you. You're giving me lots of money. 760,000.
Too much.
I'll take it. So anybody want to give me a different number? Line 6 says the balance of the payment for this assignment agreement. Assignment agreement. Come on, I got a bunch of chickens in here. All I hear is a quack, 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 quack. Oh, that's a duck.
Oh, 80,000, that's smart.
80,000?
I didn't say it, Christina said it.
Ah. Okay, so Christina says it's 80,000. Why, Christina?
Suppose like 100,000 is the incremental, and he's already paying 20,000 as part of the deposit is from 170 to 190. Remaining is 80.
Yes, thank you, Saeed. That's what I was going to say.
Okay, that's good. So we are paying 100,000 as a profit. We've given 190,000 as our deposit, and we need to pay some balance to the assignor, not to the builder, but the assignor. If we were paying it to the builder, then yes, it would have been 760,000, but it is not. We're talking about what the money that is exchanging hands between the assignor and the assignee. So line 6 would be the deposit that was paid to the developer, plus line 4, which is the payment that is to be paid to the assignor. So this is all the money that the assignor is supposed to get. Okay, so the money that the assignor is supposed to get is the money that they paid up front to the builder plus their profit, minus the money that the assignee has already put up front, which is their deposit. That would be the balance. So line 3 plus line 4 minus line 5. So line 3 is 190, sorry, 170, right? 170 plus line 4, which is 100, that's 270, minus the deposit I've already paid, which is 190, or Mary's guy is already paid, which is 190. That leaves us with $80,000 balance to go to me, the assignor. Okay, so it's, if you think about it, it's line 1 minus line 2 gives you line 4, right? In terms of calculations here, line 3 plus line 4 minus line 5 gives you line 6. So if you put those formulas there, that will make it kind of straightforward when you're making your calculations and trying to figure out how much more money do you have to pay to the assignor. Now, when you're going to pay that money, that's going to be depending on whether it's a seller's market, a buyer's market, who's dictating the terms of this contract, and how you're going to deal with it. In most cases, what you want to do as an assignee's rep is to try as much as possible not to release any profits until you at least have possession of the property. So you release the money either upon occupancy or upon final closing. But those terms are all negotiable, right? So that's stuff that you're gonna work with. Is everybody feeling okay with the calculations on here, where the numbers all come from? Anybody not feeling okay? Would you like to do another example if you want, or you're all good? Because that was pretty straightforward, it's pretty simple. Just make sure that when you're dealing with line 1, the total purchase price, including the original agreement of purchase and sale, that is the number coming from your final offer, because you're going to need to change that number going back and forth when you're negotiating. If your first offer is 900, and then when you push it up and bring it back up to 950 and all that kind of stuff, you're going to need to rework the numbers, obviously. Okay.
Yeah, Med.
Secondly, yep.
Med, if you had to pay for upgrades, where would you
Yeah.
include that amount?
Exactly. So if the upgrades are already paid for, Bart, then what you should do is to take that money and add it to the purchase price that is in Schedule C. So if I had paid if I had paid 850,000 and then I paid an additional 50,000 for upgrades, my price on Schedule C, which is line 2, would really be 900.
Okay.
If I had ordered the upgrades but never really paid for them yet, then that extra is going to be paid by the assignee to the builder, which I don't have to worry about, but it's going to be done down the road. So the builder, the assignee is not just going to pay me 950, they're going to pay me 950, but then they're going to pay the builder an extra 50,000 for all those upgrades. So they have to take that consideration.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
When, for example, on Broker Bay, we see a lot of assignments.
Yeah.
So the price that appears on this assignment, that's what the assigner is asking independently of what he's paid, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
So it's the $1 million we did as an example, and then we
That's
offered 950, blah, blah. Okay.
That's correct. So I'm asking $1 million doesn't mean that you're going to give me $1 million, or you might give me more. So it really depends. That's the ask. But the price that you're actually paid is typically quite a bit less than that. Melissa?
2 or 3 scenarios here. Upgrades that have not been paid for yet at all, but they've been accounted for in previous correspondence with the builder. Would it be wise, even though it's the assignee's responsibility, would it be wise to include a clause in there that says the assignee acknowledges that there is an additional X number of dollars for upgrades to be paid at whatever time in the future dictated by whatever? Make sure that all the time dates and times are in there, but again, just so that they're aware of it, because could they come back and say that they were not aware of it and that they thought they were buying it in whole?
Absolutely. So that's one thing. The other thing that you also may want to make sure that they acknowledge is any unpaid deposits. So if you had given the, again, the builder post-dated checks to be cashed at different particular times, and they haven't been cashed yet because the time's not there, you want to ensure that the buyer acknowledges that they have to pay that money. Because once they take over the contract, those checks that you've given the builder are not really going to be your responsibility anymore. You're going to be asking for them to be exchanged. And the builder is going to want to make sure that the assignee is giving them new checks to ensure that they're getting their complete deposit. As a matter of fact, what typically happens is the builder will say, if you want me to give you permission, you got to pay me the entire balance of deposit now.
Mm-hmm.
In order for me to give you my permission to assign. And that's what usually happens. They'll ask for the balance of whatever outstanding deposits to be paid now, not to be paid later.
Okay. And then 2 other very related questions. So let's say upgrades were done to the tune of $50,000, but the builder allowed that to be added to the purchase price. It'll be an amendment. So now the purchase price no longer is $850, it's $900. That includes the upgrades. We do not have to articulate that anywhere in a schedule. We just put that as a new purchase price. Let's say, and then you touched on this, but I just want further clarification. Let's say it was actually $850. And there's $50,000 worth of upgrades that you paid for that were not included with an amendment, I guess, for the purchase price, because it's not included. It's not going to be mortgageable. It's what I ended up paying myself. So you're saying I still put $900,000 in that line 1?
That's correct. You do.
But in that case, do I have to say in my clauses that includes $50,000 that I personally paid?
You don't have to put in your clauses, but you're going to have to deal with the bank on that. That's where the bank is going to want to see your documents in order to see what they're paying for, ensure what they're financing and what you've paid and what they haven't. Just like you normally would show proof of your deposits for the bank and all that sort of stuff, you'd be doing the same thing with these documents.
So technically though, would the bank say, well, actually the purchase price is only $850. You did these upgrades on your own and we're not going to finance the upgrades?
Yeah,
$50,000.
they may say that. So this is why the financing is separate from what you're paying and dealing with the assignor and assignee on. Those are, this is a balance of what I have to pay you, and then the actual financing is a different scenario altogether.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. So this is basically the nuts and bolts of what an assignment is all about. So what we're going to give you now is basically just a summary of what is a must and what we talked about. Some of this stuff is all repetitive. You've got the information. So I'm going to go through it fairly quickly so that you just get a gist of, the must-dos. So the must-do, obviously use the assignment agreement purchase and sale forms rather than an agreement purchase and sale form. Unless stated or agreed, no funds released until final unit transfer. This is really important when you're dealing with the assignee from your assignee's perspective. So you want to make sure that no funds go anywhere without the assignee knowing that they're letting go of their money. It's always a good idea to ensure that you've got a vendor who is a developer, for example, if you're talking about pre-construction, that will close the deal. There isn't going to be any issues. So otherwise, don't pass on the money. Written builder consent requires sometimes money. The builder will be looking anywhere to allow assignment to happen for $3,500 all the way up to some cases 50% of any profit that the assignor is making. With consent, often no MLS listing is permitted. You have to be careful. As we said, please, please, please get consent in writing if you can. In some cases, you can't, as I mentioned, for One Bloor, I think it was One Bloor West, or was it? Anyways, my realtor wasn't able to get the written consent, but she was able to assign it anyways without any problems or any issues. But this is a very realistic scenario. No consent, there's a possible assignor forfeiture of the unit and loss of the deposit. You don't want to forfeit your money or your client's money or cause them to forfeit their money. It's very important. And it's not just that, they'll lose their deposit and they lose the unit. They can't sell it to anybody else. Land transfer tax payable on the full consideration price. So if I'm selling my property now for $950, that's what you're paying land transfer tax on, not the original price that was in Schedule C. Okay, so assigner should provide original builder purchase agreement. Again, Schedule C, ideally. Otherwise, what ends up happening is that you have to make your agreement conditional on reviewing the Schedule C, so that you can see, so you can actually see for yourself, or your lawyer can see for themselves, what exactly is the total cost, including any extras that they have to pay for. Assignee will inherit all assignor covenants and so on with the builder. So everything becomes the assignee's responsibility. Diligence should include confirmation of the developer. All stated deposits as of the assignment date have been paid and are in good standing. If the assignor is not in good standing, they're not going to be able to get consent from the builder. So they have to be in good standing. Assignor assigns all rights and interest in the original agreement, including the deposits that they already paid, which is something that you want to ensure that you figure out who's getting the interest on that. Assignee assumes all responsibilities, and as we said, and takes all liability and pays developer for all adjustments. Assignor remains liable. You need to make sure that the assignor is aware. They are always liable if should the assignee not close on the assignment. So that's very important because people think, oh, I sold it, I'm not responsible, I don't have to worry about it. No, you're always on the nut for it, and you got to be careful with that. Should always have conditions on developer approval. This is in standard in the contract, just make sure nobody's crossing that off. But definitely you want to make sure that the benefiting assigner, some of the financing benefiting the assignee, and solicitor review benefiting the assignee. Those are conditions that must be there. There's got to be somebody who's reviewing the assignment, the original agreement on behalf of the assignee, and you can't do that for them. So please make sure that the lawyers are actually reviewing it. So as we said, as part of solicitor review, solicitors for both parties will finalize a formal agreement. And remember what I said about if it takes a longer time than what you've allowed for within your agreement to assign, for the builder to give you their permission, what ends up happening is things look like they're falling apart, but they're not. As long as both solicitors are working together, things will continue, and they will make sure that they will probably put it on their own forms, and they will use your assignment agreement as the basis for those forms. So clauses, we talked about some clauses that you can use. Clauses to restrict assignment. So if you are doing a resale and it's a really hot market and you don't want your seller to turn around and say, what the hell are you doing? We just sold it to these guys and now they're selling it to somebody else and making 250,000 profit. Why couldn't I have made that profit? All that stuff, you can use these. Okay, so there's two here. This is the simple one, the one in the bottom, which typically you would want to use, which says that the buyer agrees not to assign this contract in whole or part to any third party without prior written consent, permission from the seller. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. This basically says you're not allowed to assign this agreement unless you ask the seller permission and get it in writing. Okay, that's straightforward, and that's typically what you're going to use. The other one is the buyer agrees not to assign this contract in whole or in part to any third party unless the greater of this money or that percentage of the difference. So I want at least 50% of your profit, or I want at least, $50,000 for you to assign this, right? So you can put that in there. But typically you're using the second. So those are clauses to prohibit anybody from assigning a resale. These ones here are clauses that you're going to need, and we've given you all these pre-boilerplate, let's call them boilerplate clauses that you can use to just pop into your agreements, and you can just cut and paste any of these. Okay, so obviously assigner's lawyer approval, that's something that we said you must have. This one here, assignee hereby purchases and assumes and assigns all the responsibility. I'm not going to go through all these because they're pretty standard. You can see all the different clauses and how you can use them. If you have any questions on any of this stuff, you can, like I said, cut and paste any of this stuff and use it within your Schedule A. If there are any issues, concerns, anything that comes up that you feel, I don't know, it's something that I'm not really understanding, or something I need a little bit more explanation, pick up the phone and call me. I'll put it in the chat here. Where's that darn chat? Chat. Questions and answers. Is that where I put it? No, that's not chat. That's questions and answers. I haven't used this new system. Can you guys all see the questions, open, answer, all that kind of stuff?
There were no questions that were asked in the Q&A section, Ahmed, but
here,
the chat was pretty active. So you can head over to the chat tab and take a look there. But you've answered pretty much everything that's come up. Otherwise, I would have jumped in.
Yeah, the people usually preempt my questions that I've already put in here and start asking questions about things that I'm going to cover. So I usually say, just wait. If your question doesn't get covered, then we can take it further. Can you do me a favor, Sandra, since I can't figure out what the hell I'm doing here? Can you just put in my contact information? My email address is my first initial A, last name is Helmy, Helmi, at royallepage.ca. So it's AHELMI at royallepage.ca. You're more than welcome to send me any questions or anything that you like. Or alternatively, you can give me a call at 416-669-0532, and I'm more than happy to answer questions as well. If I am in a meeting or something, then I'll get back to you. Anything that you guys, anybody that wants to know anything, if not, just let me know how many of you fell asleep during our presentation, how many actually stayed awake. It would be kind of nice to know whether you enjoyed it or not. All right.
You certainly kept the interest of everybody that was here. Everybody stayed until the end, so that was wonderful. And the positive feedback is starting to come in on the chat. Everybody is sending you their thanks and lots of appreciation, very powerful and useful information. And everybody is very thankful for your session, Ahmed.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandra. Thanks for sticking around until the end. I really appreciate that. All right, folks. Well, have an awesome day. I have to get on the road and drive in this mess out there because I'll be back in the office for 6:30 for an offer presentation. All right. Have an awesome afternoon. Take care. Bye.
Thanks.